Senator Amanda Stoker, thanks for joining us again. You've been a supporter of religious freedom laws. Are you concerned now that the proposals your own government's put forward are being criticised by the Anglicans and the Muslims?
Hi, Chris. Look, I'm not concerned. Obviously, I do think religious freedom is really important and it's one of those fundamental rights that we need to make sure we protect. But what's been released is an exposure draft. It's meant to be the subject of constructive criticism. It's meant to get feedback from the constituent groups in our community so that there can be amendments and changes to reflect their practical needs. So I think this is a really positive sign that key religious groups in our community are thinking through the issues, itemising what's really important to them so that it can be taken into account.
OK, so the idea is to have some exemptions here from discrimination laws so that, say, a Muslim school could employ Muslim teachers or a Catholic or Anglican school could do the same. Now, one of the issues we're hearing about here from both Anglican groups and Muslim groups is they think this should apply more widely, not just to not-for-profit organisations such as schools, but to their charity arms, even childcare and aged care businesses, which they say would not be covered under these laws. Do they have a case?
Look, I think they make a really reasonable point, and that is that there's no obvious reason why the religious freedom concept should be restricted based on whether or not your structure is as a not-for-profit or whether your structure happens to be the corporate structure. If you are a religious group performing work in the name of your faith, in the name of your higher being, and that is core to what you're doing, whether that's aged care through Anglicare, whether that is running outdoor Christian camps, a whole range of services are often run through corporate entities or entities other than not-for-profits. So I think it's really important we take into account that feedback so that we can make sure this law has as much useful practical application as possible.
It's problematic though, isn't it? So many people work in the aged care sector or the childcare sector. People can have qualifications, they can be experienced, they can want to go and have a job in a childcare centre or an aged care home, and they're going to be rejected because of their faith. That hardly seems reasonable in a secular society.
Well, there's lots of different types of, for instance, childcare centres, lots of different types of aged care centres. Many of them have a secular kind of outlook. They operate as a healthcare type business, and then there's others that operate as a religious and pastoral type operation. And they're different, and I think it's appropriate that organisations are able to ask that the people who want to come and work in a religiously grounded organisation have a respect for those beliefs.
Now, what about the idea of the issue of vilification? Muslim groups have raised this, suggesting there should be sort of anti-religious vilification laws in the same way that we have racial vilification laws.
Look, this is a tricky one because you don't want to stray into something that could end up becoming a de facto blasphemy law. So we want to make sure that people aren't being subjected to violence, people aren't being subjected to behaviour that is outside of the bounds, but we don't want to tip the balance so far that people aren't allowed to engage in fair game kind of criticism of religious beliefs, because shutting that down under something of a de facto law of blasphemy would be quite harmful. So there's a balancing exercise that's involved here, and it's important that we get that right.
Tricky area, isn't it? A complicated debate to try and keep everybody happy. Very difficult to codify all this in our laws. Mightn't it have been better just to leave all this alone until somebody could demonstrate that there was a problem occurring in this country?
Look, I think there is demonstration that there is a problem in this country. We would not have the kind of public reaction that was experienced after the Israel Folau affair blew up if there wasn't a deep-seated concern among people of faith in this country that they are not being treated in a way that is fair and equal. You wouldn't have circumstances where Catholic archbishops are being hauled before tribunals for simply stating the ages-old Catholic view of marriage in circumstances when at the time that was the law of the land, if there was no problem. We wouldn't have circumstances like these popping up so regularly. There is a real problem here. Look, at a philosophical level, I agree with you. These things are best dealt with using the common law and natural law approach. But that, I think, reflects a world in which we don't already have a whole bunch of discrimination acts that are being used as swords against religious people. In circumstances where we already have that framework of laws, and there's no sign that they're going to be scaled back or repealed, then I think we need to be willing to come up with a solution that operates for the real world, and that is to put religious people on an equal footing to other protected attributes under discrimination law.
Senator Stoker, if I could just get you on a couple of other issues of the day while you're there. Firstly, the economy. We saw the interest rate cut on Tuesday, yet again, evidence of a sluggish economy. We've seen a dramatic stock market crash over the past 2 days. You must be very concerned about the state of the Australian economy, especially when this is fundamental to what the coalition government was re-elected on and what it's promising to deliver.
Look, yes, I am concerned. Obviously, the economic livelihoods of Australians turn on this turning out right. What gives me some confidence, though, is that the coalition has a clear plan for the economic growth of this country. It is performing better than many comparable countries in a similar sort of situation. And I have some confidence that as people's post-election kind of approaches start to flow through into the economy shortly, you know, with investment kicking off once more and people having a little bit more confidence to go about, you know, spending a little on their home or on their business in a way that they didn't have prior to the election, that will start to flow through soon, and I think that will show that things are turning around. But of course it's a concern, and I'm reassured by the fact that it is the first priority for both our Treasurer and the PM.
And just finally, the droughts. You've got the Treasurer touring drought-affected areas today. He's been in New South Wales and into Queensland. Do you think he needed to do that, get out of the CBD, actually see what's happening on the ground? We've heard from him already. He's been confronted by the, I suppose, personal anguish and trauma that he's seen out there. Do you think perhaps the federal government needs to pump some more money into families under pressure right now?
Well, they have already made a lot of changes to, for instance, the conditions under which a person can make applications for assistance for their drought conditions. So there have been a lot of changes made very recently, and that's a positive sign. But I think it's a great thing that the Treasurer is on the road in some of our regional and remote communities who are most affected by drought. That's important because it's got a real economic impact, and that should be something that's front of mind as he goes about his business. But I always find that when I get out of Canberra, even when I get out of Brisbane and I hit the road, you get a much better perspective of what real Australians are thinking, what's on their mind, and the kind of practical hands-on solutions that can be implemented quickly. And so I think it's a great thing he's on the road. I encourage all of us to spend lots of time in the regions and in our more remote areas, because you do get a great sense of what people need from doing so.
Likewise, full kudos to Anthony Albanese for finding the hat in the back of the wardrobe and getting out there as well.
Absolutely. Politicians of all colours, I think, benefit from the process.
Thanks so much for joining us, Senator.
Thanks, Chris.